gentlemen, it is November 18th, Wednesday night. It is a little after 9 o'clock tonight, but who's counting or paying attention? You're tuned in to the best fantasy football show on YouTube that is called The Mock and Roll Show. It's The Mock and Roll Show. Maybe we're not the best. Just roll with it. Anyway, I'm joined tonight by my general co-hosts, Damien, who is sitting in last place in the Mock and Roll Show League. However, it's technically he's in ninth. The only reason you're not in last is because there unfortunately is someone in the league who just isn't managing their team the entire season, and so they have players in IR. But I mean, hey, second to last, right?
I'll take it.
And then next, our other typical co-host, J3, who amongst this group, by the way, Damien, I don't know if you've been paying attention to this or not, but he is the only member of this panel to be in so far. He's still in the four-person or the four-seed playoff group for the Mock and Roll Show League.
Wow.
No surprise to us, and if it really kind of humbles us and puts us in our places to what we know, the top three seeds are the three experts that we had join us for that draft. So, just saying, yeah. Harstad and Scott Barrett and Anthony Grace. So those guys are crushing it right now.
Yep.
But and then let me introduce our special guest tonight. Joining us from BuyDFSPicks.com. You can find him on Twitter at SuperDuperman22. John Proctor, thank you for joining us on the Mock and Roll Show tonight.
For sure, man. Happy to be here.
Good. So for those of our listeners who aren't familiar with BuyDFS Picks, why don't you tell us a little bit about the site and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So BuyDFS Picks is kind of a newer startup for DFS advice. It's run by TJ Calkins and another Dynasty League guy named Ryan. And we do pretty much the DFS advice for each NFL slate. I write my picks, a couple quarterbacks, 10 or 12 wide receivers, 6 to 8 running backs. TJ does the same. Give you why we like them. We go into some in-depth, details with matchups and things of that nature. And then I'm going to start writing just a matchups column for them. I'm going to go through all of the games, break down the whole slate, give you some numbers on the, the Vegas totals and the things of that nature, and a little bit of theory in there as well. And yeah, so it's newer. We're smaller, but we're trying to get going. They just brought me on to try and give them a little more fire. Hopefully
That's great.
I can do that.
That's great, man. And actually, I play daily fantasy, so I'll definitely be stopping over to check out the site. And it's great to talk to you, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about. And I know this is sort of an on-the-spot kind of question, but let me ask you a question. If you could think of one guy or even two guys, right, that throughout this season, they had a great daily fantasy week, and every time somebody that you didn't see having it, you're like, damn, I was so close, or I could have picked that guy. If I would only pick that guy, I would have won. I would have won big. If there's one or two guys that you maybe saw have a great week earlier in the season, and then you're like, you know what? The next week or a few weeks, you're like, you know what? That was just a shot in the dark. And then they have another great week, and you're like, all right, what's going on here? If there's one or two guys that you've missed the boat on this season, or that you think people have, who would you say that is?
I'd say number one is Andy Dalton. He started out the season, I believe on DraftKings he was the top ranked quarterback for the first 6 weeks or so. And every week it was, bad Andy Dalton's going to show up this week, so let's not play Andy Dalton. And then everybody played him against Pittsburgh, and bad Andy Dalton showed up. So everyone pretty much missed the boat. I think instead of a player, I'm just going to say the Saints defense. It took us until, Kirk Cousins showed up for us to realize that they're just historically bad, and they're now a defense to target. But if you had been targeting them the whole season, then you would have been making a lot of money.
Yeah, for sure. I love daily fantasy, and it's always exciting. And it's like you go back and forth and you switch players in and out, and then you pick your lineup, and then the week happens. You're like, son of a bitch, why did I drop this guy from my lineup? I should have played him. And every time.
Yep.
So thank you for joining us on the show. Lots to talk about tonight. And you know what? Since we're talking about this, John, I'm going to come right back. I've got J3 here, and I've got John. So two Johns. This is going to be chaos. So Johnny, Proctor, I'm going to come right back to you. And, we're talking about picks here. We got Week 11 coming up. I'd like to get your perspective from both the daily fantasy standpoint and then also from just a general fantasy football, standard league standpoint, I guess you could say. And since you're a DFS guy, let's start with DFS. So from a daily fantasy standpoint, and for our listeners who play daily fantasy or are just starting to get into it, who's a guy on DraftKings this week, let's say a running back, that you feel like is a sneaky pick? A guy that you might be able to get cheap, or even a guy who's maybe middle of the road that you think is going to be, all the bang for the buck?
I think, a running back that's sort of a sneaky pick would probably, if you're playing the Thursday night slate, would probably be TJ Yeldon. The Titans have kind of sort of been bad on the ground against running backs on the ground, but they've actually been better against the pass than anybody really thinks. And Yeldon's getting 20 to 30 touches a week, so I think he could have a decent game. It's kind of a weird week for running backs. There's a lot of cheap running backs that are easy to use, so it's tough. It's tough for a sneaky running back, but I would say Yeldon on Thursday is somebody who might have a bigger game than people think.
Yeah, and I'm with you on the number of carries. We talk regularly, the three of us, off the air and even on the air, about how it just seems like the number of bell cow backs is just dwindling, more and more, and you're seeing fewer and fewer, and then the few that you have, they get hurt, and it's like, well, now those teams, with the fewer exceptions, seem to go to a committee back system because they're like, we can't fill these shoes. You know what I mean? So I've been a big fan of Yeldon this year, and he's one of only two running backs who have a few green matchups versus defenses left this season. So get them while you can. What about from just a standard fantasy standpoint?
I think Bilal Powell is a guy that people have kind of forgotten about. In the Chan Gailey system, he uses two backs. He's always used two backs. We look back at Fred Jackson and C.J. Spiller, and that C.J. Spiller role has been Bilal Powell's all season, and people kind of just have not really been a fan of him. In PPR, you definitely can't really use him in a standard league, but in a PPR league, he's kind of been that guy who will get you 10 points, and he's pretty much free because nobody's using him. And Houston has kind of been better on defense lately, so I think it might be a game where Gailey might spread him out and use a little more Powell because he's back this week. So I think Chan Gailey might give some extra run to his little toy.
Yeah, and you're right. That's definitely a sleeper pick. I wouldn't even thought about that. You're right. He flies so under the radar. You know what I mean? And the guy's always been just sort of a traditional, 2/3 on whatever team he's been. He's a guy that's like, is the first guy hurt? Okay, how about the second guy? Oh, okay, get Bilal Powell in there.
Yep.
So it's good that he found an offense that works for him. J3, I'm going to spin over to you, buddy. Talk to me about some sneaky Week 11 picks that you think are either on rosters right now, or maybe even a guy who's hiding out there on the waiver that you think is a steal if you can go get him. I can't hear you, but I suck at reading lips, so this isn't helping your cause. Try again. No. Nope. Okay, I'll tell you what. See if you can figure out what's going on. In the meantime, I think you'd be great to interview for that Verizon job that guy used to have on the commercials. So Damien, I'm going to come over to you and see if John can figure out his technical issues. John, I'm sorry, I still can't hear you.
I have a guy. I really like the question you asked before about a guy who's a sneaky start. Now, I'm not sure where he stands in terms of prices on DraftKings and FanDuel. I think probably he's going to be bottom barrel cheap. And if you're a guy who's in a situation like I am right now in my league of record, where you just don't have any running backs at all who you want to play, and you're looking for a guy who can potentially put up big points, I'm always looking for guys in those situations who can rip something off and who have the talent. For me, Andre Ellington against the Cincinnati Bengals is a guy who potentially could have a big week. They're feeding Chris Johnson like crazy. But Ellington's snap count has come up every single week. His snap count last week was the highest it's been, I think, since he came back from his injury. And although he hasn't gotten a lot of touches, the touches he's got, he's done a lot with. And I just have a feeling that Arians is going to start working him in more. The Bengals I mean, you don't know what game script is going to be. But nobody would be shocked if that game was a shootout. And so I'm not saying play Ellington over an established starter because he doesn't have volume on his side. But if you got nobody and you're like, who do I play? I think Andre Ellington should be a really sneaky play this week.
Well, if you think that's going to be a sneaky play, then you're right on the money from a DraftKings perspective. You wanted to know about what his value was, and you're pretty spot on when you say he's near the bottom of the barrel. By comparison, Andre Ellington right now is sitting on DraftKings at a mere $3,700. So if you think that's a good play, you can definitely sneak him in there, as a flex if you want to throw a flex, or play him as one of your RBs if you think there's a more expensive wide receiver and you want to stick an additional wide receiver in your lineup. You compare that $3,700 to the top, most expensive running back right now on DraftKings, which is Devonta Freeman, who's sitting there at $7,600. So you're talking about a $4,000 swing price, a $3,900 swing, and if he pans out, you look like a genius. And you know what? It's plays like that when they take off. Those are the guys that end up cashing in big because they have that player that sets them apart from the rest of the lineups. Johnny, can you give me anything? Is it not coming through? You still look handsome as hell. I got to be honest with you. Best looking guy on the show.
You look fabulous, Johnny. I'll give you that.
John, I'll tell you what you can do, buddy. I know that we're kicking it live right now, and we don't typically do. But John, if you want to reboot and shoot me a message, I'll bring you right back in. All right, bud. See if that works for you. Damien, Johnny's pick was Matt Jones, and so I'm going to come over to you. Damien, I know you're a guy who's been a fan of Matt Jones. I know you have him on your standard fantasy roster. So why don't you talk a little bit about Matt Jones for our listeners and why, since you do like the guy, why John's right to have him as a sneaky pick.
Yeah, I kind of don't agree with Johnny. I mean, he's definitely he had a big week last week, and I want to see what John Proctor, what you have to say about him. My issue with Matt Jones is that he falls sort of in the middle of his team. He's not going to get the most carries probably because that's going to go to Alfred Morris, and he'll get some catches, but they have Chris Thompson to get some other catches, and they're playing Carolina this week at Carolina. So you're just praying that Matt Jones punches in a goal line score, and if he doesn't, you're really not going to get anything from him this week. What do you think, John Proctor?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that one. For me, when it comes to running backs, I just, especially a guy like Matt Jones, it's not. I mean, he's used in the passing game, but he's not really featured in the passing game, and especially against, Carolina. Their, Football Outsiders has them as 13th against the run, and I mean they've been higher than that at times other times this season, and I don't think Kirk Cousins is going to be able to move the ball against them. He's been historically bad against really good defenses, so I think you could see a huge meltdown, and I think if I had to pick a Washington running back, I would probably go with Chris Thompson.
I think both those guys. It's funny, if you pick one, you'll get one. The other guy's going to take off. If you play the other guy, the other one's going to take off. It's like in situations like that, nobody plays the right guy. And if you both play one of them, they'll get somebody else who makes it happen. It's like nobody wins. Johnny, can you hear me? I can't hear you. So if you want to try restarting the machine. By the way, for those of our listeners who don't know, and John, I say this with love, I know Johnny, I know J3. Right now, Johnny wants to throw his machine out the window and to fix the problem. But J3, hopefully we can get you back talking. I still can't hear you, buddy. You can hear me. I don't know what you're saying, but you're trying. Okay. Let's see here. Hey, real quick, and I'm sorry to hold this up. J3, do you want to call in from your phone? Hey, I don't know what's happening. Does your chat work, buddy? Let's do that. I can always edit this audio, by the way. Let's see here. I don't know what's going on, Matt Jones, for me. Like I said, guys, sorry for the wait. I can edit all this. This is a first, by the way, Mr. Proctor. So,
hey, man, it happens.
While Sean is trying to figure out the technical stuff, let me bounce another question over to you. John Proctor.
Save it though, because if it's going to be good for the show, I'd rather just get the general.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
All right. Well, let me give you an Andre Ellington nugget just on the side. The Bengals are really pretty good against the run. They're 10th best, but they're 22nd.
There we go.
In allowing running back catches. So I think Ellington's definitely interesting.
Nice.
Can you hear me now?
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
I know you didn't want to hold your phone. I'm sorry.
Fantastic.
All right. Welcome aboard, buddy.
Up close and personal.
Okay. So give it 5 seconds of silence here, and then I'm going to continue right back with the show. Yeah, I see the argument, Damien, that you make, with regards to Thompson, versus a guy like Matt Jones, and like I was saying, you take one guy, the other guy takes off. You take the other guy, the other one's going to take off. You can't win. Johnny, what was your reasoning behind Matt Jones? These guys seem to feel like Chris Thompson might be the guy to go with.
The reason I went with Matt Jones is the last 2 weeks, he's been getting close to 12, 13, almost 14 touches a game, and he's an explosive guy where, again, he started out real fast here. He kind of slowed down, but then he's starting to pick up steam again. I think especially if you need a win and you're looking for a big play guy, I think Matt Jones is a big play guy.
I hear that. I think that's fair, too, and you're right on about the number of touches and everything. And I know, John, you were going to mention an Andre Ellington nugget going along with what you were saying before. Do you want to throw that out to our listeners?
Yeah, for sure. So the Bengals are a decent defense this year against the run. Football Outsiders has them 10th best against the rush. But they're actually, by that metric, 22nd against the running backs in the passing game. They're giving up 12% production over expectation or over league average. So if a running back's going to have a great game against them, it's going to be through the air, and I think that's where Ellington does best.
And that's probably something that I mean, even myself, I wouldn't have thought of something like that. I usually look at matchups, versus position, versus that defense. I never thought about looking as deep into it as that. And you make a good point there. Damien, I know you had something you wanted to bounce off Johnny. So what did you want to bounce off Mr. Proctor?
So just in terms of talking about running backs here, one play who's not quite as much of a flyer, this isn't somebody you're going to be able to pick up on waivers and season long, but it's somebody who I think would be a really good start this week if you're between two guys, and also I think a guy in DFS who you really have to turn toward. And I want to hear what you have to say here, John. What about Darren McFadden against that super duper porous that we got to see live when we went to the Buffalo game, Miami defense? Is he a lock starter this week? Is he a guy to...
For me, I think McFadden's kind of like a lock starter every week. I mean, there's really, I think going forward, he's probably going to lead the league in running back touches. I mean, they're just giving him the ball every down. They don't use another running back. So 30 touches are not out of the, are not crazy to project for him against Miami, and they're just, since Cameron Wake went down, they're just getting gouged.
Now I'm going to take a little bit of a different spin, and this is a really, this is not really a sleeper standpoint, but when you talk about a team or a pick that I think that could be a good choice in DFS, and if you're looking for a defense to play this week, and please. I open up the forum for you guys to all tell me I'm crazy on this one, but I actually like the Falcons' defense this weekend at home against Indianapolis. No luck. They haven't been able to really get the running game going as strong as they would have liked all season, unless I'm forgetting something. The passing game in general has been pretty suspect this season, except for a few flashes and whatnot. And the Falcons' defense has had a couple of fantasy games this season where they've really kind of taken over and put up some points. The Falcons at home this year have been strong. They've been playing lights out, and I think although Hasselbeck could still throw the ball when they need him to make plays, I feel like if this turns into a shootout, which it very well could, that I think they're going to be chucking and ducking in Indy, and I think Falcons are going to be able to capitalize on it, especially with the fact that they have such a strong running game. So I guess it would only be fair again to turn this towards John Proctor first. with your daily fantasy, stance on this. How do you feel about that about that choice?
I'm somebody who is really big into sacks when it comes to picking defenses, and Atlanta's they're last in the NFL in sacks. They only have 10 on the season, and I think they probably have a great ceiling because they're playing against Hasselbeck. But I think a team that doesn't get sacks just really has a low floor, especially if Hasselbeck comes out and puts up some points.
So quick pick from you. So who's your defensive pick this week? Like, who's your sleeping pick? By the way, I'm trying to feed my own team here, so thank you for this. No, but seriously, who do you have? Who's a team that you think is going to really, take it up?
So a team that I think is probably on waiver wires and is pretty cheap in DFS is Baltimore. They've kind of picked it up in the sack department recently. I don't think Case Keenum's any good. There's some Case Keenum truthers out there on Twitter, but after a few hot starts, he's pretty much been like a 1 or 2 interception a game kind of guy, and I think he's going to take some sacks. St. Louis they just really look horrible on offense right now.
Their offensive line is decimated. They just got 2 guys who are out probably for the rest. Their offensive line was already weak. In this last game, I think it was Nick Foles on his interception throw. In one interception throw, 2 of his offensive linemen got hurt with major injuries.
Johnny, real quick.
Foles.
Johnny, really quick, if you want to reach out and place an order, to overseas because you get them pretty cheap. If you want to order yourself a Rams jersey, I think you probably join the line if you want to, man. J3, you want to go play some O-line for the Rams?
Nah,
No?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
You got plans this weekend already? Yeah. Oh, so you know what? Survivor Series this weekend. That's right. Nah, you can't go, man. You got to be back. No. So, J3, let's talk a little bit about rest of the season. You have guys that early on, you're testing the waters, and it feels like a lot of weeks talking about, well, is it for real or is it a flash in the pan? And then we've had players that have gotten injured, and other guys have had to step it up. Like a guy like Jeremy Langford has really picked it up, whereas in Houston they can't really figure out what the hell they're trying to do with that running game or that that offense outside of DeAndre Hopkins and Nate Washington. So Johnny, my question for you is, given the lay of the land as the season has gone on, is there anybody in particular that comes to mind for you that within the last few weeks has really stepped into a role and a guy that you feel like you could ride the rest of the fantasy season through the playoffs?
The first guy that comes to mind is Kendrick West. He's a guy who really, his first game in there, he didn't look great his first game. But after that, he really hit the ground running. He's a guy who, again, I think even last year when he had some opportunities to run, he didn't look great. He looked okay, but he really embodied that starting role that Jamal Charles went down, and he looks fantastic. And I'm sad I traded him away.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. It's funny you bring that up, and you brought up Niall Davis. It's funny because this year, everybody, I think it's fair to say, everybody thought that when Jamal Charles went down, well, there would be a little bit of a shuffle. This is primarily going to be like Niall Davis's opportunity because the last time there was a situation like this, Niall Davis was the guy. And he stepped up, and he did a good job. And then, West didn't look so hot. And you know what? It made it even easier for the Chiefs at that point because Niall Davis did look good in the opportunities that they gave him. Now you look at this year, it's almost a complete, opposite situation here. Kendrick West is just on fire right now. And Niall Davis, it's like you almost forget that he's there to a degree. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So I couldn't agree with you more on that, and I really like West the rest of the season. I also like him in daily fantasy just because his value hasn't risen from a cost standpoint very much. He's still a middle-of-the-pack guy. He's still lumped in there with a lot of other guys who they're not sure what they want to do with. And so you can still buy on him easily.
And he's playing a soft defense this week too.
Absolutely. When you're talking about from a fantasy perspective, you're talking about the defense that allows the most fantasy points per game to running backs. What else do you need beyond that? They might as well not even take the field, that defense, when it comes to stopping running backs. Damian, how about you, man? Let's talk about give me a guy again stepped into a role, or a guy that maybe was shaky early on, but now you feel has solidified his spot, and a guy that you can safely ride the rest of the season regardless of matchup.
So if you're in a situation where you're sort of a bubble team and you're trying to creep your way into the playoffs, you're trying to sneak in there, I'm gonna throw two guys out here for you. At running back, a guy that I think you really want to try and acquire now because his value is diminished. And listen, there's a chance that he's not going to really bounce back or do anything huge. But I think Justin Forsett is a guy who is worth trying to acquire. He hasn't looked great the last couple weeks, but he has volume on his side. Floor is high, and he's got some really tasty matchups coming up. He plays Cleveland in a couple weeks, so I think he's going to be really strong down the stretch. I think you can get him for cheap. At the wide receiver end, I think Kamar Aiken is a guy that you can pick up who nobody cares about him yet. His target share for Joe Flacco is tremendous. Now, he's not a great wide receiver. He's not Steve Smith, but he's going to week in, week out get you volume. Two guys that you can trade for to get at a reduced volume to go into the playoffs with.
Yeah, I'm with you on both of those. I think, although the one thing I will disagree with, I will agree with you on just about everything you said there, even to the point where he's not a guy that a lot of people care about. But I think over the past 2 weeks, his stock has risen enough that he's really been getting picked up a lot. I mean, I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but I remember looking last week, and the number of his percentage of two squads from waiver, I mean, had grown, extensively. And I think even after a lot of the the experts that are out there, and like ESPN, and CBS Sports and all that, a lot of those sites put him on their list of free agent pickups that you can target. And your general fantasy user reads that. But I agree, there's a lot of opportunity to still get him. He's out there on a lot of waiver wires.
I'm saying trade for him. No, I'm saying trade for him.
But what I'm saying is there's a lot of 10-team leagues out there right now. You can go and you can pick this guy up, and because the depth is just there on rosters. But yeah, he's a guy I think you can trade for, and you can probably get him at a pretty fair price. He's probably on somebody's bench, really, or a starter on a team that's kind of weak. So
I actually got a wide receiver as well. I only gave my running back. My wide receiver would be Davante Adams. He's a guy who started the year. He's supposed to be the number 2 guy there, like a big play guy. Where he didn't do really anything the first 2 weeks. Gets hurt. You didn't hear from him for probably 5 to 6 weeks. And then since the Denver game, he had 1 reception. The next game he had 7. Last game he had 10. So he's building that trust back with Aaron Rodgers, and a guy that, if you build a trust with a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, your value is going to go up. And he's a guy who, within this last week, his stock went up 8%, people picking him up. So he's going fast. If you can get him, grab him.
I agree that Davante Adams is a good player, and he's forming a good rapport. And I hate to throw these out as a general open question because everybody's afraid to talk over each other. So, Damien, I'm going to start with you, and then I'm going to come over to John Proctor. Am I the only one on this panel that, just given the last couple of weeks, am I the only one that is terrified to start a Green Bay Packer?
No, I actually think I on one hand agree with J3, and the other, I actually don't think Davante Adams is very good. I think he's very mediocre. He got 21 targets this last week, caught 10 of those, and he got 10 catches for 79 yards. He was historically inefficient. He's still going to get volume because who else is Rodgers going to throw to? I don't think you're going to see Aaron Rodgers bounce back this year. I think he's going to be solid, but he doesn't. Jordy Nelson was a game changer. We all looked at it and we're like, well, hey, it's Aaron Rodgers. He doesn't need Jordy Nelson. No. He needed Jordy Nelson. I think that offense is in real trouble. I don't know, dude. I mean, you have to start Randall Cobb, but do you feel great about it? No. You have to start Aaron Rodgers. You feel good about that still if he's your season long, but I'm not starting him in DFS. No, I'm with you, Sean. I don't feel good about anybody on that team really right now.
John Proctor, let me ask you a question. How much would you have thought I would have had to drink prior to making this statement at the beginning of the season had I made it? And I know this is an obvious answer, but how much would you have thought I would have drank before I said to you, hey, by the end of this season, you're not going to want to play Andrew Luck, Aaron Rodgers, or Peyton Manning in your fantasy football team. Don't even bother drafting them, because by the end of the year, you're going to be killing your life for doing so. But hey, that Tom Brady guy that everybody's kind of taking a pass on and letting fall down to your 6th, 7th, 8th round, yeah, go ahead and get some Tom Brady in your squad, because that's going to be the way to go. How crazy would I have looked?
Yeah, I mean, no one expected the Packers to be, this bad. I mean, the loss of Jordy Nelson was definitely a big hit, and I think we kind of underestimated it. But one thing I'll say that people really jumped on at the beginning of the season, and I agree with Damian, is that everyone hyped up Devontae Adams coming in, that he was going to step in and just, everything was going to be okay. And I can't stand Devontae Adams. I think he's a terrible football player. And I was one of the people over the summer who, was kind of on, hey, slow down. Devontae Adams is not very good. If you look at Aaron Rodgers' average yards per attempt to his receivers over his career, Devontae Adams is I think second or third worst. And after this weekend, I think he's now the worst. So when you have Aaron Rodgers throwing you the ball and you're not getting it done, then it just says a lot about you. And I think that is really their struggle. They don't have a downfield threat. They don't have anything to open up, and it's really hard to run the offense through Randall Cobb, who's running routes 10 yards down the field when all the defensive attention is just surrounding him.
Yeah, especially, and you know what? Here's another thing I'm going to throw out there. And by the way, I will support J3 here from one standpoint. And that's just, if you're in a deeper league, especially if you're in a PPR league, if you're in a deeper league and you want to take a chance on a guy and you want to believe in a guy, there is no reason in the world to not believe in Devontae Adams, because the targets are there. And he's going to catch passes, so you're going to get points out of the guy. You just hope that he shows you some surprising flashes and maybe takes one, for 30, 40 yards, of those targets. I am not completely against Devontae Adams at all. And actually, I think, like I said, in the PPR setup, or in a DFS where you're getting if you're getting full point PPR, and you want to cheat by, Devontae Adams isn't the worst guy to go with. Because again, like we were saying, on the other side of it, he does have Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers is going to throw the ball to him. Just that offense is scary right now, and I think the thing that kills them the most, for this season, Jordy Nelson is the number one reason that offense is struggling. But I think the second thing that nobody really would have predicted, and nobody did based on what the average top 5 picks were in most fantasy leagues, was the fact that Eddie Lacy and that Green Bay running game, are just a dumpster fire. And if you don't have a good running game and you have to sit on the passing game the whole time, with the exception of, Phillip Rivers, who finds a way to get it done, there aren't too many teams. And I mean, yeah, there are other good quarterbacks who are going to get it done, but there aren't too many teams that have no issues throwing the ball whatsoever when they have no running game or no threat out of the backfield. And really, Green Bay doesn't have that. I mean, Damian, you agree?
Yeah, it's a real shame, because Eddie Lacy is an extremely talented player, and he came into this season, I think the writing's on the wall now, he came into this season out of condition. There were jokes in fantasy Twitter, like, oh, he looks fat. And people shot him down. I remember the guy I respect a lot, Christopher Harris Football, was like, oh, yeah, that's a bunch of bunk. No, it wasn't. The dude was fat. He came into this season out of condition. He got banged up right away with an ankle. He already was slow to begin with. He's an incredibly talented running back, but he was right at the tail end of having just enough speed to make a difference. And then when he was out of condition, he didn't even have that functional speed anymore. And then he had an ankle. And then I think he got into his own head. So the running game died. Lacy was not what we expected him to be. Yeah,
I just want to shift this, John. J3, for our listeners who maybe don't know, J3 played a lot of football throughout his throughout school and things like that. He was a great wrestler in school, all of those things. So John is an athlete. So John, from an athletic perspective, sometimes different things happen. When players get in their own heads. maybe they lose that fire, for what they're playing, for what they're doing. Maybe it's a coaching situation they're not happy with, which I can't imagine that would be the case because, Lacey's been with McCarthy now for several, since he's been in the league. My question for you, John, and I mean, this is a complete opinion, kind of question, but do you have any guesses, or have you read anything about what's going on with Lacey? And the more important question for me is, do you think after this season, whatever it is, whether with the team or with himself, do you think Lacey sort of snaps out of this, and do you think he comes back next year in last year form, or do you think, it's Trent Richardson time?
Yeah. I don't want to put him in the Trent Richardson kind of category. He's not that type of player. But I think in any sport, any professional sport, you have to have a closer's mentality, where if you have a bad game, if you're not performing well, you have to try and just forget that, shelve that emotion, and come out there and play hard. But listen, I'm out of shape. When you're a professional athlete being paid millions of dollars, you can't do that, because what's going to happen is you're going to get slapped with a label, and especially now, everyone's so quick to label someone. Look at Doug Martin a couple years, for the last 2 years. He was slapped a label, but he came in healthy this year. He came in shape, and he looks, maybe not as well as he looked his rookie year, but he looks like a functional NFL running back. He looks like a running back number 2, where I don't know that Lacey's ever going to be that top echelon running back. But if he can come in next year in shape with the right mental attitude, I think there's no reason why he can't still be a serviceable, functional running back or better. But again, he has to kind of shake that stigma that he's not good enough or he's too big. He needs to get his mind right and come back next year, because I think this year is unfortunately a wasted season for him. And anyone who drafted him is kicking himself for doing that.
Well, and not just that, and the two things I would say to this, such as that, but you talk about being slapped with labels, things like that. I couldn't agree with you more. I think the other thing we have to take into consideration is, the NFL anymore. Every player's on a short leash. You know what I mean? Unless you're those super top guys that you get more slack because you're the franchise. Eddie Lacy's not the franchise there. Aaron Rodgers is the franchise, and then after Aaron Rodgers, Jordy Nelson's the franchise, and after Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb is the offense. The offensive franchise. So Eddie Lacy is number 4 or 5 or whatever on that offensive pecking order. And James Starks is not a guy that anybody would compare to Eddie Lacy. You're not going to compare James Starks to a lot of running backs. I think right now there are a lot of guys who are just filling in right now, like Shakendrick West. You know what I mean? You wouldn't put James Starks on his level. You know what I mean? And so my point is not only is there the whole label issue, but you have to remember, you're a professional athlete, you're getting paid millions of dollars, you're not in shape. Like, this isn't about, you can't have the mindset that I'm the best running back on this team. It's not like they'll cut you. They will. They'll cut a guy.
Let me give you one more example. Chris Johnson.
Yes.
Had a 2,000-yard season. And from that alone, he had that mind. And again, this is speculation in my opinion, but my mindset is he had that 2,000-yard season, and he almost entitled to success now. Like, he did that. Give me success because I deserve it, and I should just have it. Where you saw what happened after the 2,000-yard season, he was terrible. He got cut. He went to the Jets. He looked terrible. And what happened was his big kind of light switch moment was he got shot in the off season. He got shot, and he was in someone's training camp this year, and he got. Did he get cut from someone's training camp this season? And then get picked up he got picked up middle preseason this year with the Cardinals, and he looks like a different running back than he has in the last 4 years, since that 2,000-yard season. So that's what I mean about mindset. Listen, this has to be Eddie Lacy's mindset. Listen, he's gonna be labeled the next Trent Richardson. Again, it's fitting. They both came out of Alabama, but it's gonna happen.
Well, here's the other thing I wanted to touch on. You had talked about the physical aspect of things as a professional athlete. You talk about the mental part of it, and honestly, I think the mental aspect is significantly more important than the physical. Because even if Eddie Lacy, it's it was a bit out of shape. He's a bigger guy than he was last year. If his head was in the game, he'd find a way to make his body work. Maybe it wouldn't work as well, but you'd see you were getting 110% at Eddie Lacy. And I haven't seen maybe more than one game this year where you thought you were getting 100% out of Eddie Lacy. There have been bigger backs, guys with bigger bodies that maybe should have been able to get it done, but they have, like a guy like Jerome Bettis. Jerome Bettis was always a big dude, but he was always in the game 110%. So I just feel like Eddie Lacy needs to get his head together, or next year he might find himself as a free agent. It's possible because they're not tied to him for a ton of money, on the cap right now. John Proctor, I'm going to spin it over to you, buddy. So right now, who's a guy? I want you to throw me a guy, or even two guys. A guy that you're selling right now before as we get ready for a push to the playoffs. And I want to know a guy that you're trying, or two guys that you're looking to buy on the way to the playoffs right now. If you're gearing up, or if you're on that cusp of making it, what's your difference maker?
All right, so I'll go ahead and just start with my big sell this year right now. If you've made it, if you're that you're going to make the playoffs, then I'm selling Julio Jones. They run into Carolina in Week 14 and Week 16, and Josh Norman's the best cornerback in the NFL right now, and it's not particularly close. Julio Jones played him in 2 games last year, and I don't have the number offhand, but over those 2 games, he had less than 120 yards total. I think he had 4 or 5 catches each game, and that's just, for your top stud who's been carrying you for the season, that's not going to get it done when you are in the playoffs. So I'm selling Julio Jones. I mean, I'm not selling him crazy, but if you can sell Julio plus something small and pick up an Antonio Brown or Julio for a DeAndre Hopkins type, I would do that for the playoffs.
Okay, and then who are you buying right now? Who's the guy that if you can buy, you definitely want to buy on, whether it be a buy low or a buy high and that you spend for?
So my big buy is Antonio Gates. I think he's probably going to be the top tight end going forward, for me at least. In his 3 games where he wasn't limited, he's had 11, 16, and 11 targets, and I don't think that you're going to get 10-plus targets guaranteed from any other tight end in the NFL each week. And I think the loss of Keenan Allen, the loss of Malcolm Floyd pretty much makes him the focal point of the offense. So I would give up a lot to get Antonio Gates.
Fair enough. J3, let me spin it over to you. Give me a buy and give me a sell.
A buy is again I don't know what you can get. I think it's more for me. If you have him, he's kind of on that I'm not selling list, and that's going to be Devontae Freeman. He has a really soft matchup, really the rest of the way through. I believe he does play Carolina twice, but you can run against Carolina. But other than that, his matchups are really good. And even going, I think in the finals week or the semifinals week, he's playing like Jacksonville or something. So he's a guy that I'm kind of sticking with. And if you'd have to get a whole lot to sell for him or to trade him away. A guy that I am selling. And I'm in, again, my philosophy for fantasy football, especially if I'm maybe on the bubble to get in, and I have maybe a Todd Gurley, I would possibly try selling that A to get 2 Bs. Especially this week when there's a lot of people that have buys, and if you're missing some players and you need to win, I'm not afraid of maybe selling that piece there, getting 2 Bs and kind of solidifying your team a little bit more, and hopefully get a late push.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there, and I also wanted to say, John Proctor, I'm with you, by the way, on selling Julio Jones. Josh Norman. I mean, who would have thought, like Josh Norman? You know what I mean? Think of how many good cornerbacks we have in this league. Josh Norman just sort of came out of nowhere. He's like, by the way, guys, I'm here, and so if you guys don't want your receivers catching any passes, send them to me. Josh Norman has really stepped it up, and I'll tell you what, Carolina needed somebody to step up because outside of the name Josh Norman, there's nobody else playing quarterback really for that team that's doing anything. And I think Damian, at the beginning of the season, when you and I had talked Carolina Panthers defense, we talked about how just terribly weak that secondary looked and how porous it looked like it was going to be, and that was going to get lit up. And then, lo and behold, here comes Norman. But Johnny, I'm with you on Freeman 100%. That Falcons offense has been dangerous this year. Let's just see if they can actually make a legitimate playoff push, something they have not been able to do in a long time. Damian, give me a buy and give me a sell.
So for a buy, if you're a team, if you know you're making it into the playoffs, I'm looking for the team that you can take advantage of, a team that's on the bubble, who has guys on bye, and specifically I'm looking at 2 Pittsburgh Steelers this week. I'm looking at Antonio Brown and Martavis Bryant. You are trying to buy these guys. Find that owner who's 4-6. Find that owner who's 5-5, who's maybe 3-7, who thinks he has a shot, who actually doesn't, and see if you can steal one of these guys from that team, because Brown is playing at a Jerry Rice level with Big Ben. And I mean, and Martavis Bryant is going to be a top 10 wide receiver the rest of the way. Actually, Big Ben's another one I'm trying to buy as a quarterback. I'm not going to overpay for a quarterback, but I'm trying to buy him. Here's my hot take, boys, on sell. This is a guy I'm selling now while his value is highest. He is not going to be as good moving forward as he's been. I don't have him as my top-ranked quarterback rest of season, and everybody else does. If you have Tom Brady, you're selling right now. That Brady lost his 2 top pieces. And I know he has Gronkowski, and I'm a Gronkowski owner. Gronkowski is sick. But listen, Julian Edelman is that team's chain mover, and Jalen Lewis was the piece that made him that offense special. Those guys are both gone. Danny Amendola is fine, but he's not Julian Edelman, not even close. Gronkowski is the X factor, and Gronkowski's going to be great moving forward. But Tom Brady is not going to be what he was. You sell him because his value is never going to be higher than it is now. Sell.
Well, Damian, I want to say that your choice for sell is, quite frankly, a horrible choice, and here's why. Because that was going to be my choice, and you stole it. You son of a bitch. So anyway, for those who are just tuning into the show or just listening to this part of the podcast and maybe went to get a drink for the last minute and a half, my choice, which is way better than Damian's choice for a sell, is Tom Brady for all of the reasons that Damian just said to sell. Anyway, let's bring it back a little bit here and let's talk a little bit about wide receivers. As you get down to the end of the season here, you've got guys that are stepping in, because players have gotten injured and they're stepping into roles. And actually, I'm going to talk about 2 teams, one that you were just mentioning and one that you mentioned a little bit earlier, John Proctor. And that is, I want to talk a little bit about Danny Amendola and Stevie Johnson. Because now you're talking about 2 guys who stepped into pretty similar roles, when you talk about the guys that they're replacing. Edelman was a strong PPR target. Keenan Allen was a beast PPR target before he got hurt. In what was looking like one hell of a bounce-back season from last year. So I'm going to come over to you, John Proctor. You've got Tom Brady delivering the ball, and yes, he's got Gronk, similar to how Rivers has Gates. If you're going to buy one of these guys, who are you buying more? Are you going for Stevie Johnson, or are you taking Danny Amendola?
I'm probably going to lean Amendola. Rivers would be another guy I'm selling. I think that offense is going to struggle. But I think Amendola, I'm in a similar sense to Devontae Adams, but I think Amendola is a lot better of a player. It's a big volume play. Amendola has already been playing, almost 90% of his snaps from the slot, so he's going to take over that 50-60% of routes that Edelman was running from the slot. And I mean, even last week he stepped in and he had a big game, and we've seen him have a couple other big games this season when they've played teams with really weak slot corners. They put Edelman outside, and then they put Amendola on that weak slot corner, and they just peppered him with targets. So I think Amendola is a guy that I'm definitely looking to buy. I like Stevie. I like Stevie a lot, but I think as we saw last week, that San Diego offense is just, they're not the same without Keenan Allen and without, I mean, they've lost every offensive lineman they have. So
San Diego. So, J3, stay classy over there. All right, buddy? And tell me, do you have, actually, I'm going to throw you a little bit of a wild card here. Are you going to go with Amendola? Are you going to take Stevie Johnson, or is there another wideout that maybe you can think of that's in that kind of similar situation that is stepping in for a stud guy that you could be?
Yeah, going back to San Diego, and I think if you're in a deeper league, a name that you might want to maybe keep an eye on is Dontrell Inman.
He 2 weeks ago. You mentioned.
Yeah, I mentioned him before. Again, especially now that, again, they really have no other weapons. And most of the time, the number one corner is going to be on Stevie Johnson. So Inman's going to have opportunity because Rivers likes to throw more than he does making babies, apparently. So
I like it.
So yeah, Inman, again, if you're in a 12-14 team league, and say if you have Peyton Manning on your roster and you put him on the IR, you have an empty spot. Take a flyer on Inman, especially going down the stretch, especially with playoffs coming. You don't know what's going to happen. He might be a guy that you could target and probably get, because I think he's only owned in 5% of leagues.
Damian, I'm going to come to you now. And I'm going to tell you a buy. I didn't mention a buy. And I'm going to give you a buy. If you're going to sell a guy like Tom Brady and a guy like Phillip Rivers, and you're looking to get a good quarterback that you can get, plus one, I'm going to tell you the guy to buy. And it's a guy that when we did our preseason show, Damian, and I know we've talked about this since on the air a little bit, but it's a guy that when I asked you if you thought he would finish in the top 20 fantasy quarterbacks, you had said no, and you're not the only one that would have said that. I'm not ragging on you for that. There are other people who would have felt the same way you did, okay, with the question marks around that team. But let me just tell you, a guy that is not only in the top 20, that is in the top 10 of fantasy quarterbacks right now that you need to buy is Derek Carr from the Oakland Raiders. Not only has Derek Carr been consistently good this season, I'm going to throw some numbers at you, Damian, from the last 4 weeks, okay, of fantasy football, okay? Against San Diego, their defense is weak. We understand that. 33 fantasy points. At Pittsburgh, 38. Before that, at home against the Jets, who are no joke, 45 points, and then against Minnesota, 25. He's got a soft pillow schedule the next 3 weeks at Detroit, Tennessee, and Kansas City, and then he's going to Denver, and that can be a little bit more of a challenging matchup. But that that Oakland offense has been solid. I don't think there's any question. I mean, Damian, are you with me? I mean, Derek, is there a better quarterback to buy right now than Derek Carr at a cheap price?
Yeah, you threw it back in my face for sure. I was wrong on that call. Derek Carr did not look good his rookie year.
No,
he looks very. I mean, he still makes some mistakes, but he looks very good this year. He certainly looks good for fantasy, and he's got 2 really strong receivers on the outside, in Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree. I think he's a buy for sure. Going back one step, because I didn't get a chance to chime in on the Amendola Stevie Johnson thing.
Okay.
And actually, I won't chime in on Johnson, but for Amendola, I think Amendola is this week's fool's gold. I know a lot of people disagree with me because he caught a lot of passes last week. But Tom Brady himself said that Amendola doesn't play Julian Edelman's role. I think people are looking at his skin color. A white dude, Edelman was white. Edelman is on another level, and I do not think that Danny Amendola is going to be able to do anything near. I think those targets are going to go to either LaFell or they have this other kid who's been hurt, Keyshawn Martin, who's going to come in who might get it, or I don't know, maybe James White gets something. I don't think Amendola. I think he's going to be a little bit of fool's gold for you. But Derek Carr is a huge buy, and I have one more buy, and I want to see what you guys think about this because this is kind of controversial. Demaryius Thomas, I've been saying this since pretty much the beginning. Thomas has been a low-end wide receiver 1. Peyton Manning has not been able to get him his targets. I don't think Brock Osweiler is a great quarterback or probably even a good quarterback, but I think Demaryius Thomas's stock takes a huge jump up now that he has somebody who can actually throw the football. I think Thomas is a buy.
Fair enough. I think Thomas. I think Thomas is a buy, but it's a scary buy because you really don't know what you're going to get there. In my opinion, J3, let me toss it over to you. But as a guy who had Peyton Manning this season, and I know that's it's been tough. But Brock Osweiler comes in. That running game has not been performing.
Brosweiler.
I'm sorry,
Rottweiler.
I like Brosweiler. Let's go with Brosweiler.
Can we call him Brosweiler? Let me call him Brottweiler. Yeah. Anyway, when you're talking about Brock Osweiler, you're talking about a guy who's coming into a system where it's not like he's getting a whole lot of help. That running game has been sketchy the entire season. It's been really kind of poor. So a lot of guys underperforming. Hillman kind of stepping up, but the numbers are down across the board. They pick up Vernon Davis. Obviously, he still has to get worked in. And if anything, while I'm not saying that Thomas can't be a guy you buy right now, you wonder if a lot of those targets are going to be, safe targets to tight ends underneath, in general, whether it be Daniels, Davis, and whatnot. Johnny, I'd like J3. Excuse me. I'd like your take on this.
Well, and typically, and you see this with a new quarterback coming into the system, especially when they're not as familiar with the speed of the game, which Osweiler is going to find that out quickly. Typically, their best friend is a safety valve, which is the tight end, and I think either one, Owen Daniels or Vernon Davis, could have value moving forward. Obviously, Davis is more of the athletic receiving type, where Daniels is more of the blocking type. Also, I think you can start seeing maybe a little more of the backs catching the ball out of the backfield. Again, we don't know. We're kind of just speculating, but I just have a feeling that a guy who's going to be coming into this offense, it's a new offense. It's a new offense for Peyton. It's going to be new for him. I think you're going to see him come in. I don't know that he'll be particularly productive. As long as he can throw the ball up, he should be okay, but I have a feeling he's going to be dumping the ball off to tight ends and running backs to at least start.
John Proctor, your thoughts
on Demarius? Yeah, so I think Brock Osweiler at this point in his career, and Peyton at his point in his career, I think Brock Osweiler is the better quarterback for this offense. Peyton last week his average depth of target was 15 yards down the field, which was second in the NFL, and Peyton cannot throw that far. He has completely misunderstood. He just doesn't I guess he doesn't realize what he can and cannot do at this point, and he's just making the worst decisions we've ever seen him make. So I think Osweiler, while I don't think Osweiler is what Peyton was maybe last year, obviously, or even at times this season, I think Osweiler can at least, knows his limits, and I think we're going to see a lot more of those bubble screens to Demarius, who's probably the best in the league at doing them. I think those will be a big boost to have Demarius see them again rather than running him down the field. So I'm Demarius is on my list of guys I want to buy too. He also has a couple good matchups coming at the end of the season. He gets Oakland in 14 and Pittsburgh in 15. So I'm buying Demarius.
Okay. Now, as we start to wrap up the show here, I was just thinking here. I'm going to throw a different question to each of you guys quickly. I think not only have a little bit of fantasy impact, but also just general impact. And certainly there'll be room for everybody to chime in. Let's try to keep it brief though. But here we go. John Proctor, I'm going to start with you. By the way, I want to thank you so much, and I'll say this again at the end of the show. But thank you for joining us on the show today. For those of you who are just tuning in or didn't catch it early at the beginning of the show, you can find more from John Proctor and more information about daily fantasy sports. It's for some DraftKings and FanDuel insight. You can go to buydfspicks.com, where John Proctor will be writing and offering advice there along with some other gentlemen. And you can follow him on Twitter at SuperDuperman22, SuperDuperman22. So here's my question to you, and I'm going to stick with the Broncos theme here. I understand Brock Osweiler is a young guy. I understand that they're trying to get him acclimated with the system. They're trying to get some production out of him, especially for the rest of this season, and the fact that they could make the playoffs. So I'm going to make this really easy. True or false? The starting quarterback for the 2016 Denver Broncos is currently on roster.
True.
And you think it's Osweiler?
I think it's Osweiler.
How confident do you feel in that about him going forward and that team's ability to succeed?
So as a guy who is a complete degenerate and played a ton of preseason daily fantasy, Brock Osweiler was somebody who they just kind of threw out there and they wanted to see how he would do. And he struggled to start the preseason. I think that had a lot to do with the new system. But towards the end of the preseason, he was kind of the guy who made you money if you were playing daily fantasy. He looked really good. He looked like he had some chemistry with Demarius, which is huge. They were running a lot of those screen-type passes and stuff like that, keeping it simple for him. And, I mean, they have such a good defense that I don't think they really need to run out and go get a new quarterback. I think they can get by with somebody who can manage a game, and I think that he can do it.
Okay. So there's no worries about anybody talking over each other. Can I get a thumbs up or a thumbs down from Johnny and Damien if you guys agree with that? Everybody, Johnny's a little questionable, but yeah, pretty much a thumbs up. So
just real quick. I just want to interject. That'll be real quick. I just think that knowing how Elway has kind of managed that team so far, I really can see them going after maybe a free agent quarterback. Maybe a veteran to come there. Maybe someone who was under at some point under Kubiak. I can see them maybe going out after a veteran, especially seeing how Osweiler does the rest of the season. If he struggles, I think the probability is probably high that he's going to do that. If he succeeds or he does well, maybe not so. So we'll see. But I'm kind of on the fence about it.
Okay. Damien, I'm going to spin over to you here with my next question again. This is totally sort of out of left field, so it's okay if you're not ready for this one. But here we go. Damien, another true or false. At the beginning of next season, Calvin Johnson will be a Detroit Lion.
I think it's false. I think he's probably going to move on. I think his contract expires. I take it. I don't know the details of his contract situation.
I believe he's in the last year of his deal, or either next year's last year, because I know there were rumblings about him possibly being on the bubble, about Detroit having to maybe pay him, so he might have potentially been a trade target, but didn't come to fruition. So
yeah, I mean
he ends up.
Yeah, he won't end up with the Lions if the Lions are smart, because they can't afford to pay him because their team sucks.
Yeah.
Their defense sucks. Their offensive line sucks.
They owe Stafford a lot of money still.
Their quarterback sucks.
He sucks.
So they need something.
Yeah, Johnny, I'm going to come over to you now. My last question, well, actually, this question has multiple parts because there's a few interesting storylines.
Ooh, it has layers. I'm excited.
Layers. It's like onions. Ogres are like onions. They have layers. Anyway, there's your Shrek comment of the day.
Call me an ogre?
Okay, so here we go with the question. John, I'm going to give you a couple of questions about this team, actually, that are interesting storylines. Number one, next season, the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles will be who?
To be determined.
So you don't know that it's going to be Chip Kelly at this point.
I don't think it's going to be Chip Kelly.
What? Okay. Well, now second question then. This is a new one. If you believe that Chip Kelly is not the head coach there, do you believe that Chip Kelly is the next head coach of the Titans, or do you think he's going back to college?
I think he's going back to college.
Okay. All right. Well,
I'm saying there's two landing spots. I think he's going to Tennessee or he's going to USC.
Okay. I know this doesn't have too much fantasy impact, so I'll steer away from the Chip Kelly question here for a second. But assuming for a second that he is, let's just say that Chip Kelly is the head coach of the Eagles next season. Okay. Is the next starting quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles for 2016 Colin Kaepernick, which seems to be a big rumor floating around right now?
Sounds about right.
Do you think he succeeds, or do you think they realize it's same old, same old?
I think he'll succeed in that offense, and I'll tell you why. Because that is an offense that is a fast-paced offense, and he's the quarterback that Chip Kelly wants. He's a quarterback that they tried getting in the draft. They tried getting a Mariota, who's that mobile quarterback, a guy who can move around, a guy who doesn't need to make as many reads. There's going to be a lot of quick plays. You're going to try and take the thinking out of it, and that's the best thing to do with Colin Kaepernick. Listen, he'll make one or two good throws down the field. He doesn't read the defense at all. I don't even want to say he doesn't read it well. He doesn't read them at all. He's a big arm. He's a mobile guy, and he has to use that athleticism. You saw, when he took over for Alex Smith in the playoff game against the Packers. He ran. He athletically, he is I think he might be the most athletic quarterback in the league with the lights not on all the way upstairs.
I feel like that's a very, very nice way of you saying that Colin Kaepernick is dumb, ladies and gentlemen.
As a quarterback standards, he's dumb.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that? John Proctor, I know you were shaking your head yes about Colin Kaepernick as the next quarterback of the Eagles.
Yeah, I think Kaepernick, if the 49ers get rid of him, he was kind of a guy that you saw, if he had a coach who kind of was a nurturing, kind of babying, he did great. And then when he has a coach who's not really in his corner, he completely fell apart. So I think Chip Kelly can put him, in his corner and kind of calm him down and get him going. And another guy I think that kind of people aren't talking about, that if they can't get Kaepernick, I think we could see someone like E.J. Manuel end up in Philly.
Yeah, that would make there's Johnny with the fist pump, ladies and gentlemen. If you can't see it here, Johnny is a renowned Florida State guy, or well-known Florida State homer. So by the way, John Proctor, I just want you to know, anytime you come on this show, okay, and you're welcome back anytime. But anytime you come here and you say anything about any player, regardless of where he is on the depth chart, the practice squad, if he's carrying the water, if he went to Florida State, if the team's attorney, went to Florida State, you earn so many points in J3's book, and that's that.
I'm just saying, I started Dustin Hopkins this week, 18 points. I'm just saying, underrated kicker.
By the way, you should know, guys, that anytime I watch football with J3 and he gets really excited about a player, I always begrudgingly ask, I've never heard of this guy. Did he go to Florida State? Johnny's like, of course he went to Florida State. So, Damien, I'm going to spin it over to you now, and I want to get your fantasy take on this, and then we're going to wrap things up here. Damien, and it's really simple. You're a guy who, you've been known to get really excited about players that have a high ceiling, and you know what I mean. And you also are good about picking guys that at times that has a safe floor. But you know what I mean. So you do have that range. So my question for you is this: let's say that Chip Kelly is the Eagles coach, and let's say that Colin Kaepernick does end up with Philadelphia. It's very early right now, and this is pure speculation. Where do you see him going? If you had to predict now, where would you see him ending up, would you say, around the end of next season? Do you see him finishing as a top 10 quarterback in Chip Kelly's offense?
No, I don't think he's a good quarterback. So no.
No. Where would you? Okay, let's say that all starting quarterbacks next season. Hold on. Let's say that all starting quarterbacks next season stay healthy for their teams. There's 32 teams. Where do you see Colin Kaepernick's fantasy value next season?
17.5. He's not a good quarterback.
Yeah,
I don't think he's good.
But if you're Jordan Matthews, you're going to be saying that's my quarterback.
What a terrible combination! A guy who can't catch and a guy who can't throw.
Yeah.
He's a match made in heaven.
Based on this conversation, all they need to do is trade for Devontae Adams, and they're set.
Yeah, that's right.
Devontae Adams on the outside, Matthews on the other side,
and pick up Larry Donnell.
Yeah, right. And then they can throw Torrey Smith in there, who can catch, but nobody will see him anyway. Perfect. Listen, on behalf of J3, on behalf of Damien and myself, John Proctor from BuyDFSPicks.com, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Mock and Roll show tonight. We had a great time, and like I said, you're in love anytime you're going to talk about somebody with Florida State, so you can remember that for the next time you come on the show. We'll do an all-Florida State show. I think
yes, I've been waiting.
There it is.
Can we do a Florida State draft special?
Oh my God! I gotta get off the air here. This is gonna be a disaster. But seriously, thank you so much. And if there's anything you'd like to say, anything you'd like to plug, anything you'd like to share with our listeners before we wrap things up, the floor is yours, my friend.
No, just thanks for having me. It's been fun. You guys are cool. I had a great time. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I pretty much tweet out everything I'm thinking. Saturdays and Sundays for daily fantasy, so shoot me questions.
Actually, I think that that's great, and John, I really appreciate you telling us that, because this is a great opportunity to kind of give some advice to a particular fantasy football player right now, and that is Damian. Since John Proctor likes to shoot out everything he's thinking on Twitter, I think it would be great if you would shoot everything that you're thinking about fantasy football to John Proctor and not J3 and myself.
Yes, it's a great idea.
You want to talk about a match made in heaven?
You're in trouble now.
Yeah. So, no, seriously, though, thank you for coming on the show, man. We look forward to having you back. On behalf of everybody, thank you for tuning into the Mock and Roll Show. Again, hey, you want to reach out to a guy like John Proctor for daily fantasy advice? Well, here's a good place to start after you talk to him. Go to DraftKings.com right now, sign up, get free entry into a play this weekend, and use the promo code MOCKROLL to get that free entry, MOCKROLL. There's still plenty of time left in the fantasy season, and really only takes one good week to win it big. So go to DraftKings.com, sign up now, use the promo code MOCKROLL, and then hit up John Proctor at buydfspicks.com to win it big. Thank you guys once again for tuning into the Mock and Roll Show, and we're here typically on Wednesday nights, 9 o'clock East Coast. We'll see you soon.